Hello everyone, Cosmo here. Well, if you remember, the second season of Bokutachi wa Benkyou Dekinai ended with all the girls getting into the universities they wanted and with Ruka going to a university abroad. Before she leaves, everyone goes to see her off. Yuga falls down and Uruka helps him to get up the same way a girl helped him to get up at the festival. And in case you don't remember, there was a legend that said that if a couple holds their hands just when a firework started, they were destined to be together forever. Or something like that, I don't really remember much of it. It implies that even though she's going abroad, Uruka is destined to return and be with Nariyuki. In the manga, something similar happens, but slower, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. But first, I'm going to start with a little context, because in the manga you can see how all are nervous days before of their exams, and yet all get a relaxed but an emotional letter from Yuiga. As it is a happy manga, and it is to be expected, Uruka passes her interview, and the other girls pass their entrance exams. But not everything is happiness, because Uruka simulates that she's going to have to leave Japan, so she decides to leave without regrets and declares her love to Yuiga in the most expected confession by her team, that they were few, but there they were. She tells him that she loves him, but that her love is impossible, because she's living for her future. Later, she organizes a group trip where Yuiga is so nervous about being with her that he ends up fainting. This leads to a little fanservice of the base waifu and an almost kiss from Fumino that was interrupted by Uruka and Ogata. In the end, Uruka is happy that the three of them are in love with the same person, because perhaps she knows that even though she will not be there, she thinks that Yuiga could be with one of the two of her best friends who she also loves. A bit of flashback shows us a Yuiga depressed by the death of his father, his sister not wanting to go to school and feeling that he must take responsibility for being the best to get a scholarship for the college and take some of the financial burden of his family. It is there that he meets Uruka, who only remembers her for being the swimming prodigy. Uruka follows him to the last station, because she wants to see him laugh and smile, since lately she has only seen him very serious. Uruka meets Mizuki, with the intention of making her go back to school, activating her broken jealousy in the school pool. As she forgot a towel, the brother and sister return to the pool to find out that Uruka is not only a talent, but also an effort and dedication, which leads to Mizuki returning to school and Yuiga losing the emptiness in his eyes. Already in the present, Yuiga plays a little with a Ouija and manages to speak with the spirit of his father, who helps him to understand that he's in love with Uruka. However, on the day of graduation, Uruka does not show up, because she's going to travel that same day. Yuiga looks for excuses to accept that the fact that he will not be able to tell her his feelings, but thanks to the closure of Ogata and Fumino romance, Yuiga managed to accept that he wants to see her and goes to look for her. On the way, just like the anime, he meets Chris, who helps him to a certain extent, as there is traffic, but she also managed to have a closure with her connection to him and his father. Yuiga gets off and keeps running even though it's raining, because he has already made a decision. On the way, Asumi arrives to rescue him, thus settling the debt she considers she has with him and having a little of the affection she always wanted and yet can never have. After all the complications, Nariyuki arrives to find her at the airport. He declares his love for her and they have the most awaited kiss by the Ruka team only, that technically were few because in the whole manga there was never a character development of her. They put everything in the end. Then she goes abroad and years later they organize a welcome party because she is returning to Japan. Here I assume that they were speaking online, some video calls, because Yuiga without a doubt asks her to marry him and she accepts, giving us an ending that nobody expected and that many will hate. Or not. In the last pages, they show us that Uruka was the one who held Yuiga's hand during the festival, and they surprise us by saying route 1 of 5. Here, my theory is that Tsutsui Itachi, the author of Bokuben, in his year as an assistant of Naoshi Komi, author of Nisekoi, saw how the Japanese readers hated the end of that work, because their favorite was Onodera, and yet Shitoge won. To avoid that, Tsutsui decided to give everyone the ending they wanted. So the Shimmering Ebony Mermaid Princess arc ends, and we move on to the next arc, the Thumbelina Supercomputer. The excuse the author used to make these parallel timelines was the festival, being the point of divergence who grabs Yuiga's hand, being Ogata, the lucky one in this arc. The art begins with Sawako and Ogata living in the apartment they rented as freshmen at the university. Yuiga appears as an udon delivery man at Ogata's restaurant, where they tell him that strange things are happening in their house and ask him to stay over. Yuiga agrees without doubt, because he can see Misao, the little ghost who was shown some time ago. At night, a beautiful scene occurs with Ogata asking Yuiga to say her name, and they hold hands, and as you imagine, yes, nothing else. The next day, there is a bit of Ogata fan service with swing where she had to get to the beach, a compromising situation caused by Misao, and a hint from Ogata mentioning that they look like a couple in love. On her return, Yuiga mentioned a game she has had with her since Christmas, which turned out to be a competition in which Ogata would win if Yuiga fell in love with her, proving that the legend of the festival is real. Once on the beach, both are caught in an area due to the rising tide. They set fire, well, Misao does. They slowly approach, and when they were to talk about their relationship, Sawako arrives, saving the day. There, we learn that Uruka and Fumino found out about this game, and that's why in this timeline Uruka does not declare her love to Yuiga. On Sawako's birthday, we learn that she apparently does not have a good relationship with her parents. Her mother shows up the next day and asks her to come home, and although Sawako was treating her indifferently, she suddenly accepts. Her mother wants to live alone with her as she is separating from her husband, and although Sawako seems to be taking it well, deep down she doesn't want her parents to separate. Misao identifies herself with the situation she is living and wants to help her, as does Ogata. With the excuse of the pop-up store to sell the Ogata's board game, and with the help of Misao, they manage to get the family together for a game of the board game. The game was altered to resemble Sawako's life, bringing back memories to the family that end up revealing their true feelings, and taking advantage of the situation, Ogata attacks again, telling Yuiga that she is there for him so that he doesn't need to feel alone. Sawako leaves the house for a few days to have a serious conversation with her family, leaving Yuiga and Ogata alone. Not being able to handle with this situation, Nariyuki suggests going for a walk, where they meet Chris, and end up helping her carrying some things into the high school. Memories of her student years appear as they walk, and a fall similar to the one they kiss happens, and although this time it didn't happen by accident, it did happen by choice. Nariyuki lost the game by declaring his love. However, the result is a draw because Ogata loved him without taking care of the legend. Already in the last chapter, they both tell their father that they are in love, and he does not react as he usually did, but accepts it and tells Nariyuki that he will be there for him if he needs help. And as if remembering again, the couple decides to play the first game of cards they both played. Risu shows how much she has changed as she managed to beat him, and they end up kissing, while Misao disappears as she no longer feels alone. Fumino's arc begins with her thought, with a desire to use the legend of the festival to obtain Yuiga's love, even if it means betraying her best friends. And so begins the arc of the sleeping beauty of the literary forest. It's the day of the exam, and they are on their way together. However, a dog makes Yuiga to be about to fall down the stairs, but at the last moment, Fumino sacrifices herself to avoid that, hurting only her leg. What is surprising is that Yuiga is being a butler in her house to make amends for letting her to get hurt, and promises to stay by her side until she recovers. Yuiga is a little overprotective the next day, making her love him even more, imagining a future with him. It's February 13, and the girls want to make Valentine's Day chocolates, deciding that they will do it at Fumino's house because she's hard. However, Yuiga was already in her house and ends up hiding inside a kotatsu, causing some compromising situations. Fumino ends up finding out that Uruki is going to propose to him as in the other timeline, and thinks that she no longer has a chance with him. The girls end up giving their chocolates to Yuiga. However, Fumino loses the opportunity to do that and tells him that they are for her father. The chocolates end up in the river, where Yuiga manages to rescue them, and Fumino tells him that the chocolates are for him. Once home, Fumino lies about her condition, so that she can spend more time with Yuiga. By the last entrance exam, everyone is accepted, and Yuiga realizes that his role as a tutor and nurse is coming to an end. The subject of his father comes up, and he comments that he was a great man that everyone loved, and that he wants to be like him. Fumino tells him that it's not necessary that he is great in his own way, and when it seemed that Yuiga was going to declare his love to her, Uruka arrives to confess it. Fumino runs away forgetting to keep the lie on her uncle. The trip to the mountains also happens on this route, and although Fumino wants to avoid being with Yuiga, they end up protecting themselves from the snow in a shed, warming themselves with their bodies and with a blanket. We are shown that Nariyuki obviously rejected Uruka, as he himself has realized how he feels about Fumino. When she returns from the trip, she decides to join the battle between Uruka and Ogata for Nariyuki's love, and decides to go for him at a place where they had their first date, where she confesses her love and he responds in the same way. They end up crying in each other's arms, promising that they are there to support each other. 4 months later, they all meet again at a pool, where Ogata and Uruka threaten her that if she doesn't make Nariyuki happy, they will use the big guns. Fumino tries to do couple things with him, however, it is not their day, because they start to cross paths with people they know, thus avoiding the romantic atmosphere. Already at the festival, they manage to hold hands, and are about to kiss, but another interruption occurs that Yuiga totally ignores, and by declaring their love again, the route ends. The route of the Tomorrow's Night Pixie, the arc of Asumi, begins in the same way. However, unlike the others mentioned above, this one takes place when Yuiga is already a teacher and takes a class on a remote island, and as a result of fate, he does meet again Agrodeire Asumi, who is doing her residency at the same school. This makes the memory of Asumi kissing him come back to his mind as he goes to his room, which ends up next to hers. Once in the same room, noticing that her sewing skills cannot be compared to Yuiga's, she asks him for help to improve them in exchange for favors. Fate keeps preparing a surprise for him as he becomes the health coordinator, making him spend even more time with Asumi. Yuiga realizes that she's afraid of working with human patients and helps her feel more comfortable when she has to inject them. Later, what began as a shield prank on his teacher ended with Asumi and a girl fainting from the fall. They start carrying them to the exit, and Yuiga ends up revealing to his student that he hopes to be someone Asumi trusts. The next day, a festival brings back memories on when Yuiga, at his graduation, invited her to a theme park after the kiss they had back then, but she turned him down. When they are alone, he asks her if that kiss was a joke for her. She apparently shows him that it was not, as she kisses him again even though she immediately regrets it. Asumi's father suddenly appears and apparently still thinks that they have been together all this time and should already be thinking about a wedding. However, he later reveals that all the time he knew they were not a couple, and that he knew his father. They were best friends, and when he wanted to entrust the surgery to him, Sojiro didn't want to do it, trusting that in a better hospital it would be safer. But, as we know, he died anyway. Asumi learned about the relationship between them and felt that she no longer deserved to be in a relationship with Yuiga. Suddenly, in the middle of all the rain, 2 of their students are in danger, so Asumi and Yuiga go to help them. Yuiga, despite not knowing how to swim, prepares to try to save them, as he is confident that his senpai will save him if something happens. They both start swimming towards their students, and in a moment of rest, Yuiga tells her that his father died with a smile, so they should have no regrets about it. They manage to save the children, and when only he is missing, the tie becomes violent, dragging Yuiga. Sojiro goes to the rescue, but a piece of the dog is about to hit them, and Yuiga has to get in the way to protect the doctor. Due to internal injuries, he must have surgery. However, Sojiro cannot perform it, because he has broken his arm. Nevertheless, he wants to perform the surgery, putting his arm at risk, because he feels he owes that to Yuiga's father. Asumi tells him that he did the right thing, and now she is the one who must do the right thing for Yuiga, and decides to perform the surgery with her father's guidance. Yuiga wakes up, saying he dreamed of the first time they met, and without further ado asks her to be his lover. Asumi, embarrassed, delays in expressing herself, but ends up telling him that she has been in love all this time. In the last chapter of the arc, we are shown how they love each other, from Asumi dressed as maid upon waking, the morning kiss, and going to school embrace. A party is held for Yuiga's recovery. Sojiro again bothers the couple about having children, and at the moment they manage to be alone, Asumi tells him that she is happy to have studied medicine, because it managed to save his life. Yuiga without hesitation asks her to marry him, and Asumi accepts, mentioning embarrassingly that she also wants to have children with him in the future, and gives him a kiss saying daddy. And so we arrive at the route most awaited by all, or well, the most aware by me, the route of Mafuyu Chris, with a little bit of deja vu when holding hands at a festival. The route of the Queen of the Thin Ice begins. Like the route of Asumi, this one passes years later, with Yuiga being professor in his alma mater, sharing class with Chris. Yuiga's house is still used as small, but now that everyone has grown, there is not enough room for everyone. So Yuiga goes to look for an apartment to rent and manages to find a good and cheap one, with the help of Miss Amada. However, it turns out that now he is Chris' neighbor, who is still the same messy one as always. Already in high school, a student asks Chris for love advice, which manages to give an answer that avoids showing her lack of experience in love. Already at night, Chris is playing a romantic simulation game to obtain a little knowledge, with which perhaps she can help her student, but as is to be expected, she is terrible at the game. Yuiga helps her to go through the game, but at one point they realize that they are in the same situation of the game and get nervous about it. Kiri's mother is looking for a partner for her, even though she is not interested in that, and that's why she lies to her saying that she already has a boyfriend. For that, they send their aunt with their daughter to check if that's true. So they have to act like a happy couple with particular situations. The day ended with an accidental kiss on the cheek and an obvious lie that was not going to be revealed. We continue the journey of this pair of teachers who now accompany their students on the excursion trip. At night, the teacher decided to drink to relax, and Kiris, as expected, only needed to smell a little to end up drunk and affectionate with Yuiga in his room. A little contact between their bodies is experienced while trying to avoid the teachers noticing her presence, and with Yuiga stating that Kiris has always been a role model to follow. Thanks to Kiris' companions, they avoid being discovered, and Yuiga ends up telling her his feelings. Despite his courage, Yuiga is rejected because Kiris still sees him as a student. The next day, Kiris, thinking that Yuiga might be sad, is surprised to see him living with Miharu and continues to follow them undercover. But in the end, it turns out that Miharu is simply advising him for when he decides to have a date with Kiris. He reveals that he had already met her in another festival when Kiris was still a student. Both at the end discover that Kiris was spying on them. Miharu leaves them alone, and again Kiris apologizes for hurting him. But as a whole alpha male, Nariyuki returns to tell her that he likes her. And more than bothering her, Kiris reveals that she does not feel that she deserves the love of anyone. Because of her ice skating training when she was a student, Kiris missed the school trip and usually missed the festival as well. In her senior year, she manages to finish her performance quickly to address the festival, and although she's given a warm welcome, she's afraid to let people enter her heart, cooled by her parents' comments. Weeks later, on the day of the Ichinose festival, Nariyuki manages to make Kiris experience the sensation of leading a festival, but no longer as just another attendee. In the night of that festival, Nariyuki manages to gather all the promotion of Kiris that will go to unearth the time capsule that they put before graduating. Nariyuki trusted that his father would not leave Kiris aside, and she is surprised to see that all her friends have written messages of support for her, even her teacher. This melts the ice in her heart a little more, realizing that she is also in love with Nariyuki. Being now a little more aggressive, she invites him to an amusement park. They go through the roller coaster, through the haunted house, and end the date in the Wheel of Fortune. The atmosphere was good, and they decide to hand over the gifts they had prepared for each other. Gloves. The difference in quality is very noticeable, and Kiris ends up holding their hands in an attempt to take them off. She tells him that she is ashamed to show her uncool side, which Nariyuki says he likes all sides of her. Finally, the ice in her heart disappears completely, and Kiris declares her love for him, and they give each other the kiss that everyone has been waiting for, or well, at least me. A few months later, I think, they both move into the same apartment, formally starting their relationship as lovers about to get married, who on top of that are almost late for their own wedding. Before the ceremony, Kiris' parents show up, accepting that they were not the best parents and that they left their daughter in Nariyuki's hands. And for the first time, we see the face of Nariyuki's father, giving them his blessing from the beyond. Already as a married couple, both of them joke a little about how many children they want to have and that both feel like the happiest persons in the world. But there is one more route. Did I say 5? Well no, there is one route left that is simply a route in which they show a possible harem ending, so my thumbnail was not a clickbait at all, in which all the known female characters in the story end up holding Nariyuki's hand, and more than that, during the festival fireworks, where they show us that the legend of the festival was simply created by Nariyuki's father, promising his eternal love to the one who would later become his wife. And that's it, we say goodbye to the cast of Bokuben forever. And well, this was my little summary of Bokuben, or We Never Learn, so if you like it or feel that there were mistakes or something to correct, you can leave it in the comments, it would help me a lot, and with this, until next time.